Welcome to the Strategic Veteran, where we chart the course from service to civilian triumph. I'm Adam Peters, a veteran, entrepreneur, and your fellow navigator in the quest for a life of impact and fulfillment. My mission is simple: to empower you with the tools and stories that turn challenge into opportunity. Having walked the path from active duty to where I stand now, I understand the search for purpose that comes with hanging up the uniform. It's a path I've walked, with its trials, its tribulations, and its victories, and it's a journey we're on together. This podcast is more than just conversation. It's a beacon for those seeking to redefine our missions through entrepreneurship. It's about igniting the entrepreneurial spirit that lives within us, the spirit that compels us to create, lead, and make our mark on the world. Here we connect with veterans who have built businesses, sparked change, and found their purpose in the marketplace of ideas. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They've transformed their service into startups, their experiences into enterprises, and they're proof that you can too. So whether you're scribbling business plans on napkins or stepping into the arena of innovation, remember, you're not alone. You're in good company. So let's explore these stories of transformation and take the first steps together on our path to purpose. Let's begin. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Strategic Veteran. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today we have a deeply moving and inspirational guest with us, Scott DeLuzio. Scott is an Army National Guard veteran who served with distinction for 6 years, including a deployment to Afghanistan in 2010. Scott's journey is one of immense courage, resilience, and dedication. Driven by a strong sense of patriotism and the events of 9/11, Scott joined the military to serve his country. His deployment to Afghanistan was a significant chapter in his life, marked by both valor and tragedy. During this deployment, Scott's younger brother, Stephen, who was also deployed to Afghanistan, was KIA. His profound loss, coupled with the stresses of combat, brought significant challenges upon Scott's return to civilian life. Despite these hardships, Scott channeled his experiences into helping others. He founded the Drive On podcast, a platform dedicated to sharing inspirational stories of veterans, providing hope and healing to those who listen. Through his podcast, Scott discusses personal triumphs, life experiences, and emotional hardships, aiming to give strength to the military community. Scott is also the author of Surviving Son, a poignant memoir detailing his combat experiences and the emotional struggle of losing his brother. His work is a testament to the sacrifices made by military families and the enduring spirit of those who serve. Scott lives in Arizona with his wife, Vicky, and their 3 children. His dedication to helping veterans find their path to healing and purpose is truly commendable. Join us as we delve into Scott's powerful story, exploring his military services, his challenges, and his ongoing mission to support fellow veterans. So let's dive in and warmly welcome Scott DeLuzio, a true embodiment of what it means to be a strategic veteran. Scott, brother, thank you for being here with me on a Saturday afternoon. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, you bet. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be able to come on and share my story and hopefully inspire some folks along the way and get a good message out there. And I love what you're doing with your show, and I've been following your newsletter and everything, and I kind of like seeing how you do things too, and it's inspiring to me to see just all these people out there trying to help out veterans, and finding you and having us link up like this is pretty cool.
Yeah, brother. No, that's awesome, man. So let's dive right in. Let's talk about a little bit early life, where you grew up, what inspired you to join the military, why the Guard and not active duty, all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Connecticut. And for you geographically challenged people, it's between Boston and New York. I get asked that question. Since I moved out here to the West Coast, like Connecticut, I know where that is, but like, where is it? Like, really? Between Boston and New York,
Yeah, it's such a tiny state, because I got a buddy that lives in Massachusetts, but his dad lives right across the border in Connecticut, and it's like a 5-minute drive from his house. And I'm always like, what? Like, this is tiny.
Yeah, a few of the jobs that I've had throughout my life, I've had coworkers who lived in Massachusetts, even though we were working in central Connecticut. It's like a half-hour, 45-minute drive or so, depending on where it is and traffic conditions, obviously. But it's really not that far from Massachusetts. It's not far from it's not far from anything. Like in the Northeast, it's like all close together. But it's weird when you live there. Everything seems like it's so far. It's like, oh, I'm going to New York. Oh, all right, well, pack a bag because you're not going to be back forever. It's like it's 2 hours away. It's not that far.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm getting ready, Father's Day is tomorrow, so we're doing dinner with my dad tonight, and he lives an hour up the road, and I hear that from him all the time, like, "It's too far for me to drive down here every weekend and see you because it's an hour there and an hour back," and I'm like, "It's not that
And
far."
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well, yeah, I guess perspective really. When everything is kind of like condensed over there, like a 15-20 minute drive, it seems like that. Okay, that's pushing it. That's about as far as I'm willing to go right now. It's like yeah, the mall's a half hour away. It's like, oh geez, I don't know. Do I
right.
really need to
Yeah.
go?
For
Um,
sure.
so anyways, yeah, so grew up in Connecticut and joined like you mentioned in the intro, joined after 9/11. When 9/11 happened, I was in college in an even smaller state in Rhode Island, and for the geographically challenged, it's next to Connecticut, just a little bit east. Um, and so, yeah, when 9/11 happened, I was in college, and like a lot of Americans, I was pissed off at what had happened, and I was ready, pretty much ready at that point to just drop out of college and join the army because I was like, I'm going to kick some ass because I this can't stand. I don't want to see this happen to my country again. Um, and kind of slept on that decision. Figured, I'm not going to do anything right away. Let me sleep on that. And so I slept on it, and I decided, knowing myself, if I was to drop out of college at that point, I probably wasn't ever going back to college. I just wouldn't pick it up. And I was already partway through, so I was like, all right, just stick it out to the end. Finish your degree, and if there's still a war going on at that point, then let's revisit this decision. But there's no need to make a rash decision right now and kind of influence the whole trajectory of the rest of your life if that's just how I am. It would totally fuck everything up.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, no, you thought about it logically. I was a 17-year-old kid who just wanted out of Posey County, Indiana, so I was like, "Yep, Army,
yeah,
let's go."
exactly. So yeah, I I had one of the cooler head moments, and I happened to think about it, and I was like, yeah, I guess I'll stick it out. Um, so anyways, in the meantime, my younger brother, he was in high school during 9/11, and eventually he went to college. Um, he started off going to Hofstra University in New York. Um, kind of had a rough freshman year. Kind of uh, enjoyed
Partied, didn't he?
the party
Yeah.
college culture a little too much, and he came home and he said to my parents, he's like, I want to join the military. I need to get some discipline in my life. I want to join the military. And my parents were like, well, kind of the same thought process is like, well, why don't you try, a different school or a different place? And so they found a school, Norwich University. It's up in Vermont, and it uh, is basically like a military university. It's where the ROTC started and all that kind of stuff. And so he could kind of get the best of both worlds. He can go to school, and um, he could get that military discipline and kind of routine and all that kind of stuff instilled in him. And while he was up there, um, he ended up joining the National Guard. He met a buddy up there, and he kind of talked him into it, I guess. Like, hey, it's kind of cool. You want to come check it out? And it's almost like the thing that they tell us when you're growing up, like, just say no to drugs kind of thing. Like, oh, just because all the cool kids are doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's kind of the situation that he was in. It's like his buddy was doing it, and it like seemed cool. So hey, yeah, why not? So he ended up joining the Guard while he was up there. So he joined the Vermont Guard, um, and he was still going to school. And he was able to defer going to basic training until summer break. And so he did uh, summer break. He went to basic training, came back, went back up to school in the fall, and at some point during that time, I forget exactly when it was, um, he volunteered to go to Iraq. And we were like, holy shit, like that wasn't supposed to happen, you know? But um, shortly after he had joined, um, I had started hearing these reports in the news that the military were struggling to meet their recruiting numbers, and it was just a bad time for recruiters, I guess.
What year was this? Do you
It's
know?
2005.
Okay, so we're getting ready to move into the surge. So yeah, that sounds pretty accurate.
Right, exactly. And so I'm hearing these reports and I'm thinking back, okay, this is just a few years earlier, and or for a few years earlier was 9/11, and I'm like, where the hell did all these people go who were looking to go kick some ass after 9/11? Like, what happened to all those people? And then I realized, well, shit, I was one of those people, and I still haven't done anything to join the military, to serve in any way. I had graduated college at this point, and I hadn't revisited that decision. I just kind of kept moving on with my life, and I just never did that. And so after my brother joined, um, we had grown up in a very patriotic family. We looked up to military and first responders and folks like that as kind of like the superheroes. And um, I started looking at my brother, my little brother, the kid that we used to, wrestle in the backyard, and we used to, get into trouble like, boys do. Um, I started looking at him like he was a superhero, and I was like super proud of him. But when I was like, man, I still haven't done anything after 9/11. After I said I'd revisit this decision after college and all that kind of stuff, I still haven't done anything. And so I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, I'm still young, I'm still fit enough. I wasn't like, army shape, but I was, I I could run. I just chose not to, kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah. You'll quickly get into
Yeah,
shape when you get to basic
exactly.
training. Yeah.
Um, and so I was like, why not me? Why not join the military? And so you asked about like why the guard as opposed to like active duty. A couple reasons. One was it was somewhat familiar to me because that's what my brother did while he was in school, and so I kind of knew a little bit about what it entailed as far as a 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year, which I turns out that's not entirely true either. um,
Yeah. Yeah. The Army's got a way of
they
lying to
do.
you
They
without
they got
lying
a
to you.
great
Yeah.
marketing department though. Like they they could
Yeah.
sell it to
Yeah.
you, but then they're like, "Yeah, but here's this little thing."
Yeah.
Anyways, so and I had just started a job right out of college, my first job out of college, and I kind of felt like I owed them, like they took a chance on me, hiring me right out of school, and I'm like, I kind of can't just leave them hanging like this. Like that felt like a shitty thing to do. So I was like, okay, well, I could go active duty and make this full time thing for me, or I can stick around home and serve my community as well as doing normal life, as normal as things can be, right? But um, and so it's kind of, to me, it looked like it was kind of like the best of both worlds. I could keep doing building my career, and I could continue to serve in one way or another. So I decided to go with the guard. Um, of course, I was my first job out of college. I was an accountant working for an accounting firm, and I uh, was able to pick my basic training day anytime from the day that I enlisted through a year later. And I decided to pick it sometime in the middle of tax season, which talk about screwing the employer over. That I just knew that
I don't want to go active duty and screw over my employer, but I do want to go to basic training in the middle of our
in the
busiest
busiest
time and
time of
screw
the
the
year, yeah.
employer over. I love
But
that. I love that.
but I gave them plenty of notice, so they knew it was coming. And I continued to work there for a couple of years after that too. So I didn't totally screw them over.
Right.
It wasn't the best, but at least I kind of justified it to myself. I was like, well, at least I didn't leave them altogether. It's just I gave them part of the tax season.
Now, you said you enlisted. I'm curious why enlisted and not with a college degree. Why did you not come in as a lieutenant?
Yeah, so they actually tried to sell me on that as well because I had scores were great. I could have picked pretty much any job that I wanted in the military. I could have gone in as an officer. Um, but like I was saying earlier, my brother joined first. He enlisted because he didn't have a degree at that point, and he didn't have enough college credits even for even going the officer route. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure never happened was that I didn't want in any way, shape, or form my service to overshadow his. I never wanted to outrank him, especially right off the bat. I never wanted that because, like I said, like he joined and I was super proud of him. Like I was looking at him as if he was some sort of superhero, superstar, or whatever. And like I didn't want that to be overshadowed by now I'm outranking him. To me, the rank didn't matter. I wanted to serve. I didn't really care, in what capacity. I wanted to, not that I didn't care in what capacity, but like that, the rank wasn't important to me.
I'm always interested by the decision to be an officer. I've had several people on the show who had an opportunity to become an officer, and advice that I give to people now when they ask me, would you recommend that I join the Army? Just hindsight being 2020 for me, I always tell them go to college first, get your degree, and then become an officer. And then I also tell them go to the Air Force. I really do, mainly because my sister and my brother-in-law both were Air Force majors, and I've watched my sister's career. She just got out this year, but I've watched my sister's career, and it was always better than the way that I had it in the Air Force. From where they stayed when they went on TDY trips to, the way they're treated like big boy rules all of the time to just, the time off that they had. I mean, like my sister, it seemed like she was always on leave, always on leave. And I'm like, I did a lot longer than you did, got a lot of bonus leave for being deployed so much, but never had the opportunity to use it. And so I just am. I'm always curious because I know not that I want to change anything about my career because, I mean, that's a large part of, what's shaped me into the person that I am today. But I would have probably joined the Air Force as a JTAC to get access to the reenlistment money that they were getting while we were deployed and just be in the Air Force where instead of living in tents at NTC, they're staying in hotels at NTC. So I am. I appreciate that you oblige, the decision. And do you think your brother would have looked at it like you were outranking him?
I don't think he would have cared, honestly. Like looking back at it now, he probably wouldn't have cared. And I think it was just me more like trying to have some respect
For sure.
in some way. Like it was just it may not have even been noticed by anyone at the time. It just was how I wanted to show my respect and my and how proud I was of him for joining.
Well, and I feel like too, like, you felt inspired to join after he took action and joined, right? And so why overshadow that? No, that makes total sense. So you joined, you said in what year was this that
It
you
was
joined?
late
05?
2005. It was like November 2005.
So you went to basic training and you were an infantryman, right? Why infantry?
Also,
Because your brother?
because he was, and I I knew the way he and I were. If he was an infantryman and I was anything other than that, it would have been like, well, my basic training was harder than yours, and my deployment was so much harder, and we had all this. It just would have been a pissing match constantly. Didn't matter what I did. It always he and I both would have been going back and forth. Well, I had to do this and I had to do that, and we noticed that in the military, the veteran community, anyways. Is oh well, that pogue, like
Yeah, everything's a dick measuring
it is.
contest.
Everything is.
It's just what it is. I have a little brother too, and I'm 39. He's 35 or 6. I can't remember. He's like 2.5 years younger than I am, and his birthday's in January, so he's 36. And it's still that way to this day. And he's like a probation and parole officer in the state of Pennsylvania, and I am now a podcaster, and like it's always something between us. So I relate to that 100 million%. Um, When did you find out you were going to Afghanistan?
So this was sometime in 2009, I think, if I'm remembering the timeline correctly. It's like early 2009. There was talks that, hey, this deployment's coming up. Let's start, trying to figure out, uh, you know, what do we need to get there to be an effective, unit? Do we have enough people in enough positions? Do we, what are we gonna need to do that? And we started noticing there were some reorganizations of the companies. So there's a battalion in Connecticut, of an infantry battalion in Connecticut, and so there was some reorganization. Started seeing some new faces pop up, some people who've always been there who started disappearing, and it's like, okay, where are these people going? Why are we moving stuff around? And so we started figuring that out. um and uh and yeah, so then around that time, that's when they're like, yeah, we're tracking on deployment for, later in the year, was when they were telling us, like, we'd be leaving for, you know pre-deployment training and all the stuff that you need to do before you deploy. So
Right. Now, were you and your brother a part of the same National Guard unit, or were you in different
yeah,
units?
initially we started off. So, like I said, he was in the Vermont Army National Guard. I was in the Connecticut Army National Guard, and uh, the units that we were in started off. They were completely separate. They I don't think they had any uh, common linkage other than, their army. Like big
Mhm.
army,
Right.
linkage, um, but there was some reorganization of units that took place when the 86th uh, Brigade Combat Team was developed, and his unit and my unit both ended up falling under this 86th Brigade Combat Team, and um, and so, because we're both under that same brigade, the deployment was a brigade wide deployment, and so that's how both of our units ended up going overseas.
Got it. Now, I'm curious about this mainly because you talked about it in your book, if I'm not mistaken, and you'll have to bear with me because I'm reading like four books at one time, trying to remember everything. Just it's just how I do things. But you talked about when your brother came home from that deployment to Iraq, something had changed and he was different. And so, is that in the back of your mind when you're getting ready to deploy yourself? And how is that affecting you? And how are you dealing with that? Noticing the changes in your brother. I didn't have anybody like that, right? Like I saw how the guys were when I got to my first unit 2 weeks and some leave after they came home from the invasion of Iraq. So, I didn't know any of those guys before they had, deployed or whatever to see the changes that were made. I just knew that my life was a living hell. So you were exposed to that and you got to see that. So how did that affect you knowing that you're going into your own
you
deployment?
know, I had a lot of stuff on my plate before that deployment. So my wife was pregnant, probably
Shit.
around the same time that uh, we got notified that we were deploying, is kind of when we found out that she was pregnant, and just I actually was away at training when she went into labor, and they got me home. Like, she sent a Red Cross message or whatever, and that was a whole 'nother issue. Like, she tried sending a Red Cross message, and they wouldn't send it until there was till the baby
There's
was
like a
born.
threshold,
It it
yeah, it's
it wa
weird.
I forget exactly the details, but it was something like the baby had to be born or something like that before, and so, like, I ran it up my chain of command, and, our the folks in our battalion, they were like, well, fuck that. No, you're going home. And so they kind of fudged some paperwork, and they were like, yeah, we got to get him on a flight out of here. And so we were in Indiana at the time at Camp Atterbury, and and yeah, so they got me on a plane, got me home. I ended up getting to the hospital a couple hours before she gave birth, and so I did end up getting to be there. And the way they kind of figured it is, the day that the baby was born, I'd have like 10 days of leave from that day on. So So I got to stay home for 10 days. Everyone else is back there doing getting all the shots and all the other crap that you got to do before you deploy and everything. And I'm like hanging out. Although I'm like, yeah, I was hanging out with my family and whatever. But I got more sleep when I was with the Army than I did when I was at home with a newborn. So when I got back, I was like, guys, I just need to sleep, man. I just need to go to sleep.
Right. Yeah. 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 So the time comes, you go to Afghanistan, you're in Afghanistan. It's, I assume, probably early 2010, right? Late 2009, early 2010. Are you and your brother stationed? Are you guys on the same cop, or where are you at in Afghanistan? Paint us the picture of, your brother and you are both in Afghanistan. Did he start his deployment before you? Did you deploy at the same time? All that good
Yeah,
stuff.
sure. So, like I was saying, we were in Camp Atterbury, doing kind of pre-deployment stuff, getting the shots and all the paperwork and all the other crap that has to be done, right? And uh, my unit left to go down to Fort Polk in Louisiana uh, and finish up our training before we were sent overseas. And his unit had done it kind of opposite, where they were doing training.
They went to
Yeah, they went to
JRTC first
JRTC.
and then did
Yeah, and so
SRP.
there was a
Right.
brief window where our time there overlapped, and so actually the last day that I was at Camp Atterbury before we went down to Fort Polk, um, uh, our unit had missed our allotted time for chow and for like dinner time, and uh, I grabbed me and a couple of our guys after we're done loading up all the buses taking us down to Fort Polk. I was like, "Look, we're just going to go in. We're going to get some food, and we'll sneak back out. And what are they going to do? Tell us no? Like, fine, then we just won't eat. So at least give it a shot." So I happened to walk in, and my brother's unit it was their time to eat at that point, and so he was in the chow hall, and he sees me walking in, and I got to paint this picture. So I'm carrying my assault pack, and like they give you a packing list. You pack all your shit, and you got all this stuff, packed in. But then you got a couple of like extra things, like your own personal things that you might want to carry with you, but there's never enough room for it. So I had it strapped on the side of my assault pack, and I'm looking like a hobo, like with just everything hanging off, and it looks stupid, right?
As we all
As
do.
as
Yeah,
as
it's
one does,
common.
right? So I'm walking into the chow hall. I got a couple of my guys, and my brother comes over to me, and you got to just kind of understand the type of person he was. Is he always would like just try to like get under your skin and just kind of like dig at you, but
He's
in a
constantly
loving
fucking
way,
with you. Yeah.
like he just wanted to just fuck with you, and it was fine. It was all good. And he comes up and he like smacks me, and he's like, "You look like a damn hobo. What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "We're sitting over here. Come grab your food, bring it over here. You can eat with us." And so I sit down with them. He's kind of ragging on me. I'm ragging on him. We're kind of going back and forth, and it was a nice thing, because I knew I probably wasn't going to see him again until after we got home, because when we got to Afghanistan, our unit got there first, and his unit followed probably a week or two later. So similar time frame. We got there. It was just maybe a couple weeks off. But he was stationed about 80 or 90 miles from where we were, and we were at Fob Torkham, which is in Nangarhar province. It's right on the border with Pakistan. It's along main supply route that goes in and out of Pakistan into Afghanistan, and that area was where about I think it was like 80% of NATO supplies would come through, because they got shipped on cargo ships. Afghanistan's landlocked, so Pakistan is the nearest port, so they put the shit on trucks and drove it through. And so part of our job was
It's not
securing
the
that
only thing
border.
that comes from Pakistan
No,
either, right?
exactly.
Like,
That's not the only
God.
thing coming from Pakistan.
Fuck.
Yeah. So where our fob was, like, there was like a big hill on the backside of the fob, and we had OPs all on top of this hill. But you go up there and you're looking like right into Pakistan. So like we're that close. I think it was about 2 miles. Um, he was, like I said, 80 or 90 miles away. He was still close to the border, not as close as we were, but yeah. So we were all in eastern Afghanistan, anyways.
Got it. And so you didn't see your brother at all while you were in Afghanistan
No,
then? No,
no,
no chance, no any kind of joint operations between his unit and yours. I know that happens from time to time, right? Like it's not uncommon for, you know, I've seen it happen in active duty, right? Family members run into each other on some kind of operation or on a fob somewhere or whatever. But so let's talk about what were you guys what was your mission in Afghanistan? Was it really just kind of security on the border there and you know maintaining that supply route and you know smoking bad guys that are coming across with the supplies
yeah,
or
it was largely the border security type mission. We worked with some contractors that you were helping us like screening people. The border crossing, it was more than just vehicles that would cross through the border. It was a pedestrian border crossing too, and it was amazing how many people would be coming through both ways, both directions every single day. And so like when we would go there, we would go there, these contractors, they had all the biometric machines and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Not to get into too much detail on what they were using or anything like that, but um, they would just basically grab people out of the crowd and be like, "Hey, we're checking your biometric
everything,
screening and
everything,
checking
yeah,
all that stuff just to see are you a terrorist?" Basically that type of thing. It was just like a random sample kind of thing, and you never knew who you're going to pick. Part of our job was searching vehicles. This one time still pisses me off to this day the way they I love dogs, by the way. I got to start this story off this way. I love dogs, and the way they treated animals over there was just it just pissed me off. And this one time, um, we were searching this vehicle. We had the car pull over, and they we said, okay, pop the trunk, and we're gonna go search your vehicle. And in the trunk of the car was a dog, and he's panting, and he's looking like just hair away from death because it's hot as hell there. It was probably 120 plus degrees there, and the dog's in the trunk, no air conditioning, no windows blowing breeze, nothing like that. And the driver of the car had the balls to ask us for a bottle of water. And so I said, "Okay, yeah, sure, no problem." And like for himself, by the way, he wanted a bottle of water, and so I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." So went and grabbed a bottle of water. I took my knife and I stabbed the cap of the bottle of water, and I went over to the dog and I just started spraying the water in the dog's mouth. And I'm
good for
staring at the
you.
guy the whole time and just like shaking my head, like this freaking guy. Um, but yeah, so we were searching for weapons and explosives and all sorts of stuff. We had all sorts of testing. That they even had this enormous building that was uh, at the border that the Afghans we had local Afghans who worked in this building. Thank God it was them and not us. But this building was basically like an enormous X-ray machine, and so trucks would drive in and they'd be able to see like the different cargo that's inside of these trucks. I don't know specifically how it worked and like how they were able to tell like the metal from the outside of the container versus an AK-47 or something.
Of
Like I don't
course,
know I
right.
don't know how they would be able to do it, but they were able to. And it was pretty interesting how they did it. Turns out that building was highly radioactive. We they came to us and they were like, yeah, a lot of our employees that are working here, they're getting cancer. And so we had a like a Geiger counter, and we went to the thing, and we had one of our sergeants. He like went in the building, and then he started like walking back quickly, and then like he kind of like taped off a thing like an imaginary line. He goes, "Nobody crosses this line." because it was just, and I
Dang.
had been in that building several times, and I'm like, oh my god, am I going to grow a third arm or some shit? Like, you know,
Right.
so so yeah, a lot of it was border security. We also did missions where we would drive out to local villages, and we'd just do kind of goodwill type missions, and try to help people out there. We occasionally, the people would tell us they had found some explosives. Like one time there was a bunch of RPGs that were just laying on the ground, like outside of this village. And they're like, yeah, we found these, but we don't want our kids to explode or anything. So can you help us with this? And so we went out, secured the area, basically waiting to get picked off, and waited for EOD to come out to come take care of it. But these guys came out. I don't know, the balls on these guys. There, it's basically just like the rocket from the RPG was just sitting on the ground, and he just walked up to it, looked at it, picked it up, threw it in the back of his truck, and drove away. I was like, "You're not gonna blow it up here or do something to it,
Right.
like anything. Like it's just rolling around in the back of your truck." I'm not exaggerating. Like he just took it and tossed it like you were tossing a backpack or something.
I've seen EOD guys do some crazy shit, and you're like, I don't want any part of
No,
that. Like,
that's
just
not
get
the
it
job
away
I would
from
want.
me.
No, no.
Right.
Although,
Like, I'm thinking we're gonna do a bit, and he's picking up a 155, tossing it in the MRAP, and it's like, this is it. Like, we waited for you to come out here to do this. Like, you're
like
fucking nuts,
I
dude.
could have done that. I wouldn't have,
Right.
but I could
No.
have.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but yeah, so we had missions like that. And towards the end of my time there in Afghanistan, our missions started to get further out. Like it was just like basically driving distance from our fob, which isn't incredibly far in Afghanistan with the MRAPs and the range that they get. It's not incredibly far, but the mission started getting further out where they would fly us out from the fob out to some remote village somewhere. Taliban activity is suspected there, and so they'd fly us out. But before we did any of that, we started training with the Afghan army, and we were training them on basically our tactics. Which, in hindsight, looking back, that was now they know our tactics.
Not a good idea.
Great.
Yeah.
And
right.
they have our weapons, and they have our tanks,
And they're
our
crooked as shit.
yeah, exactly. And so one of the problems that we had though was this training was during Ramadan. And so for anyone who's not familiar with Ramadan, like the Muslims, they don't eat, they don't drink, they don't do anything like that. They don't consume anything really during the daylight hours. And that's when most of our training was. And it was in summer, like late July, early August time period. It's incredibly hot. I was talking about the temperature before. It was incredibly hot during that time period. And if you haven't eaten or drank anything all day, you really don't want to be running around out in the sun. You don't at all. And so we were lucky if we maybe got an hour out of these people to do any sort of training. And then they just kind of wandered off, and they would go find some shade, and they just go sit and do nothing until nighttime when they can eat. And then they'd be having a feast and a celebration and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, all right, well, we still haven't really trained at all, right? But these missions that we would go on, that's what we would be doing is basically taking them out, and they would take the lead on these missions. They go through, search the houses and all this kind of stuff, and we were there kind of as support. If things went sideways, we were there to help out. And I the way I describe it is kind of like a driver's ed instructor, where you got the driver, the student who's behind the wheel. He's in charge of basically everything, but the driver's ed instructor's got that extra brake on his side, on the passenger's side, who he could tap the brakes if need be, if you're getting a little out of hand or whatever. So I kind of look at it that way. I think it's a pretty good explanation of what we did with them. Is we didn't have total control over what they were doing, but we can help out if we needed to. And so So that's what we were doing towards the tail end of my time in Afghanistan, and this was just time period wise. This was like August, I would say, like, give or take,
Fair
maybe late
enough.
July.
Any significant events, any firefights, any kind of anything like that that you had experienced, or was it kind of pretty
It
calm?
was fairly calm. As a matter of fact, the entire deployment was fairly calm. And we had a few issues where, the base came under fire. We had one night we had a sniper who, one of my good friends, he was down at the one of the checkpoints, the entry control points, um, and he was sitting there on the 50 cal, and he hears a go like right past his head. Like, the sniper was trying to get him, he missed, thank God. Um, and he just like lit up the whole area outside of there, because he was like, I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm getting them.
Little death
Yeah,
blossom. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Spray and pray kind of thing. So, I mean, we had a few things like that, but nothing huge. Um, we the for the most part, our deployment was relatively safe, as far as that goes, um, until it wasn't. Like, the very last day that I was in Afghanistan, that's when uh, we were in a we were in firefights, and that was a rough day.
So let's talk about when you found out that you had lost your brother. Where, like timeline of the deployment? Because I assume you were. When did it happen during your deployment, and what were you doing? How did this affect you? And how did you, if you had to stay through the rest of the deployment, how did you get through that? Because I can't imagine. I like we talked about before we started recording. I have a younger brother. I went through, you know, growing up with my younger brother, we had each other all the time because we didn't grow up the greatest, to this point where, I get a little bit older. I'm getting my own friend group because he is 2.5, 3 years younger than I am, where I don't want him around. And then now in my adult life, I would give anything to be around my brother all the time and his kids and all that stuff. So let's talk about, that day and how you found out, and were you even notified after it happened? I mean, because you're in country together, so we know the notification process if you're not in country is takes for fucking ever. It's weird. But let's move into that and talk about
Yeah.
that.
Um, so I was on one of these missions with the Afghan army that I was talking about before. We're in a remote village. We flew in the night before, um, and we couldn't start our mission until first light because the Afghan army didn't have night vision goggles at that time, and it would have just been a big clusterfuck just
Clusterfuck.
going into
Yep.
this village, them falling down the mountain as we're walking down the mountain into the village. And it's like, well, they know we're here now, if the helicopters didn't give it away, the Afghan soldiers who were falling off the cliff, that pretty much gave it away. So, we kind of had to wait till first light anyway. So we were just kind of hanging out, and um, uh, we went through the village. We let them kind of take the lead. They found a bunch of Afghan army uniforms, which was pretty good. Good find. They found some explosives and some weapons that they were able to kind of gather together. And we had a EOD guy with us who just blew everything. And so all that stuff just was obliterated. Um, and for anyone who's never experienced something like that, just seeing that the all that stuff just getting exploded, we were a safe distance away, like we weren't, but you feel it. You feel it like come right through you, like the shockwave. Like, you ever see like the nuclear bomb goes off and you see the shockwave going out, all the way. Like that goes right through you and you feel it. It's such a weird feeling. But anyways, so yeah, we're in this village, and uh, other than finding a few things, nothing really popped off. There was uh, there in general, it was just again another routine
Just routine
mission
little
that we were on, and
patrol.
and
Yeah.
hey, I'm not complaining. Like, I'd prefer it that way, like where it just was routine. I didn't need to go be Rambo, while I was over there either. Um, and uh, at some point during the mission, I got a radio call saying that there's a helicopter coming in, and my squad, I was a squad leader at the time. I needed to go secure a landing zone, and so I'm like, okay, well, there's a clearing at the end of the village over here, so let's go secure that landing area, and wait for the helicopter to land, and pop smoke, let them in, and a an American Army general steps off the helicopter, and two French soldiers stepped off, and I don't know what their ranks were. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Yeah,
and I don't know
I
that I would
wouldn't
know
know
what their
either.
ranks were anyways, because it's probably something weird.
Right. Yeah.
They got little white flags on or something. I don't know.
They're weird. The French people are weird.
So,
It's just weird.
So at that point, at the landing zone, I'm like I'm a E5 sergeant, and I'm like the highest ranking guy. So I'm like, I guess I go greet the general. Sweet.
First of all, what the fuck is a general doing way out here is probably your first thought,
yeah, because I
right?
didn't really
And why
know.
is he with two French
Yeah, and
guys?
I
Yeah.
didn't really. I knew the area that we were in was like the whole country kind of got split up amongst the different NATO countries that were in country, and um, one of them obviously being France. And so I think the area that we were in was a French kind of controlled area. Why we were the ones who were in that area doing the missions and not the French guys beats me. But hey, I don't. That was above my pay grade, right? So I go
Right.
over to greet the general. Hey, sir. Thanks for joining us. I don't know, like, what the hell do you say to a
Like,
general?
what do you even say to a general who gets off a helicopter in a like, that's not common for those that are listening. Like, generals don't usually come to wherever you're doing an operation and get off of a helicopter unless it's like something that's planned way in advance and you have to put on the dog and pony show to walk them through whatever they want to see or whatever. At least that's been my experience with super high ranking dudes wanting to come through a battle school.
Exactly. Like, that was a first for me. We did. I will say we did have a Navy admiral come through when we were doing like the border missions, and he wanted to go check something out at the border. And I don't know specifically what off the top of my head right now, but he wanted to go there, and so we were basically like a security detail for him, to bring him out
But
there.
you probably knew well
We
in
knew in advance
advance
that he
that
was
that was
coming.
happening.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
that point. This mission, though, this mission that I'm talking about now, I had no clue that he in advance that he was coming. I knew, 5 minutes before when we went to go secure the landing area.
And when you got the
Yeah,
radio call.
basically,
Yeah.
that's when I knew that somebody high ranking. But then he steps off, and I'm seeing stars on his shirt. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then I see French guys come off, and I'm like, this is getting weirder. Like, is this a clown car? Like, what else is popping out of here at this point? And so I'm talking to this general, and at this point, I still don't really know what he's doing there. And so I'm waiting for someone else a little higher up the food chain who has a clue what's going on to come and relieve me as his like escort or whatever. So I'm just chatting with him for a little bit. And I'm sitting there talking to him, and he tells me like these French guys wanted to come check out what we're doing, and kind of report back up their chain of command. And he kind of gives, now I'm getting clued in on what's going on here. So I'm like, oh, well, cool, thanks, sir. But um, he gets a call on his radio, and it informs him of two American soldiers who were KIA earlier that day. And obviously, I'm saying obviously, but it's not obvious maybe for some listeners, but you don't give names on the radio. Like, you use call signs, you use other things like that, but you don't use actual names.
Battle roster number is the most common, which is usually there's 3 letters and then your last 4
Something
is
like
usually
that,
your battle
yeah.
roster number. I can't remember. I've been out a decade now, so it's
So it's something along those lines. If a name is an identifying name has to be given at all. In this case, there was no need to. It was just there were 2 KIA, and it was just a report. Hey, we had 2 KIA. This is what happened. And so at that point, I was like, oh shit, like, Americans getting killed, that's never a good thing. You like anyone else hearing that type of news, you feel like you feel bad. But what are you going to do? So eventually my platoon sergeant comes over, and I'm like, cool, tag, you're it. you got the general now. And I'm
Right.
like,
I'm
I'm
done
off,
with this. Yeah.
Um, and so threw him under the bus, let him have general babysitting duties, um, and I went back into the village, and our squad continued on our way doing what we needed to do, clearing the village and all that kind of stuff. Um, and a little while later, I got a call on the radio saying my commanding officer was looking for me, and I was like, "Is this day getting any more weird?" Like for the folks who aren't aware, and I know you're connecting the dots in your head with what I'm saying here, but uh, I'm an E5, a sergeant, and the commanding officer, if he has anything he needs to tell me at all, it's going through the chain of command. It's going to
And it's going through your platoon leader or your platoon
it,
sergeant. It's not
it's
coming
not coming.
directly to
It's
you.
right there. There's more dots along the way than A to B, right? So, um, and and it's like he's looking specifically for me. And so whenever that happens in my mind, in my experience anyways, it's either something really great happened or something really bad happened. And I'm like, I didn't
Yeah, my instant thought is I'm in trouble. I did something wrong. I'm about to get my ass chewed. The commander wants to see me.
yeah, I
Fuck.
was like, I did not do anything spectacular today. Like I just did my job. I wasn't getting any medals. Like no one's writing no war movies are going to be made about the actions of my day. Like none of that was happening up until that point in that day. I was like, this is just an average everyday thing. And so I'm like, okay, did any of my guys lose any sensitive items? Did they lose something? What happened? And I had a list in my pocket that I carried with me. It had all the sensitive items, had serial numbers, had everyone's information in there. I checked everything on the list, and everyone had everything. I'm like, cool. It's not that, but shit, what is it? And my head's going, it's spinning, trying to figure out what it is. I'm like, all right, I just got to go link up with the commander because he's not telling me whatever it is. He's not telling me over the radio. So I got to go meet up with him, and so I eventually get back to where he is, and um, actually before that, our sergeant major was there, and he goes, "Come on over here, take your helmet off, and take a knee." I'm like outside the wire, take my helmet off? Are you out of your
Yeah,
freaking
come
mind?
on. Yeah, what?
But I'm like, the area we were in was relatively safe. I guess I don't know, uh,
You still don't want to
but I'm
take your
like,
fucking helmet off.
this something doesn't smell right. Like why all of this? Like it was just one more clown coming out of the car, right? It was just weird stuff. And he's like, yeah, come in. He'll meet you over here, and um, you know, and so I was just waiting for him. He came over, and he's like, yeah, come take a knee. I got some information for you, and I'm like, all right, well, now my head's racing. Like, really, what's going on? Um,
So at any point did the fact that one of the did you ever put two and two together? Never did. Never crossed your
no,
mind.
so up
Okay.
until that point in in this deployment, not just that day in the deployment, my brother, as far as I was concerned, was basically invincible outside, minor bumps and bruises, scrapes, things like that. He had busted up his ankle at one point in the deployment, but it was like, okay, well, shit happens, like that type of stuff, right? But he was going to come home. Um, like that was basically not even a question in my mind, because that other kind of stuff, serious injuries, losing a limb or being KIA or anything like that, that is stuff that just happens to other people. That's not going to happen to my brother. Like that was the attitude that I had throughout this whole deployment. And so uh, he brings me over, and he says, yeah, your brother's unit was had gotten ambushed, and he had gotten hit. And at that point, still the light didn't go on for me, and I'm thinking, okay, he got hit, so he's hurt somewhere. Can I get to him so I could be there, for moral support, or blood or an organ? I don't know, something. Like if there's something I can do to help him, I want to be there to help him. Um, and uh, the commanding officer, he looked at me. He's like, I don't think you understand. He's been killed. And right then, it was like a punch in the gut. Like air just escaped out of me. Um, and you know how like when people have those near death experiences, like their life flashes before their eyes, like everything up until that point is like flashes before their eyes, or so they say. I don't know. I haven't had that experience myself, but um, mine was kind of the opposite at that point. My life flashed forward where I was envisioning my life now without him in my life. And it was like the worst feeling I could have had at that point. It was like, it was terrible. I mean, if anyone who's ever lost anyone close to them, you know, it's not an easy thing to go through, right? This is not a unique story or anything up until this point. I mean, maybe the location is a little bit unique, but you know, up until this point, you know, this is like anybody else losing a close relative or close friend or someone who you're just close to, right? Um, and so. Uh, I was distraught. I was just in a bad place, and so you know they brought a couple guys over to just kind of sit with me, just make sure I was good, make sure I wasn't going to do something stupid and you know get myself hurt or killed or anything like that. So they just kind of hung out with me for a little bit, but probably I don't know, maybe it was 15-20 minutes after finding out that my brother was killed. We started taking fire from the village that we just came out of. And that was uh, that was a point where the grief turned into rage, just complete anger, rage. I wanted to kill some people at that point. Like I was looking like I wanted to go down in that village and kill everybody that I saw. It was just pure rage. And I just had like the briefest moment of clarity where I was like, if I go and do something stupid like that, um, first off, I'm not making it out of there alive, most likely. So my parents are going to have a second knock on the door. My wife is going to be a widow. My newborn son, is going to grow up without a father. And I was like, shit, okay, I got to keep it together. So I'm like, I got to figure out a way to compartmentalize this and stuff the grief into its compartment and get my head on right. So not only all that stuff, bad stuff could have happened to me, but um, I was a squad leader too, so I had a bunch of soldiers who were under my command, and so I had to keep my head on right for them too. Because what if something bad happened to them? How do I explain what happened to their families? Be like, yeah, I was sad, and so that's why your loved one's not here anymore, you know, or I was angry, and that's why your loved one's not here anymore. Like I had to keep my head on right. Um, so grab my guys. You know, we they already were sort of set up in a perimeter, and we kind of filled in some gaps along the way, and you know we did our best to kind of repel that attack, um, and that was by far the absolute worst day of that deployment. It was of that deployment of my whole life, really, if I'm being honest. Um, but that was um, such a difficult thing to be able to quickly figure out how to compartmentalize all of that and keep your head on and continue with the mission. It it was just super difficult to do, but kind of what you had to do. There are some people I've talked to in the years since then that were like, well, couldn't they let you sit it out or something? And that type of thing. It's like there's no like safe space that you can just go sit and cry. There's no timeout corner, you know.
There's no timeout in war. You don't, yeah, you don't get to just, yeah, and I think it's part of the larger picture, right? Because having to compartmentalize that so you can continue to operate in the environment that you're finding yourself in and deal with the threat and make sure you get all your guys home, probably, and we're going to get into this here very shortly, but um, compartmentalizing like that probably amplifies what you go through when you get out and the transition and all the demons that you have to deal with, because you're forced to shove all this down so that you can accomplish the mission, right? Like it's always mission first. And I don't think for those that listening, we do have a lot of civilians that listen. They're intrigued by the stories, and there's no way to paint a picture of what that does to you, whether it's losing your brother or losing, in my case, just battle buddies, brothers and sisters close to me, right? Because they are like family, and you see that, and you still have to just continue on and do the thing, because if not, more people are going to end up like that. And it's just shitty. It's just shitty. It's the nature of what we chose to do with our lives at the
Yeah,
time,
and
right?
I think when you sign up, when anyone signs up, they understand the concept of death. They understand the concept of something. You might lose a limb, you might, get seriously injured, you might have, things like that, that you understand that it could happen. But I think somewhere in the back of your head, you're like, yeah, but will it though? Like, will it
Of
really?
course.
Was
Yeah.
it?
Well, that's not going to
It's not going to
happen to
happen. It
me,
could
right?
happen,
Yeah.
sure. Like, I could go to the store right now and I could go buy a lottery ticket and I could win, but it's probably not going to happen, right? you know?
Right. Right. So what happened after? So you get through that mission. Was there an opportunity to escort your brother home? Did they? Yeah, I'm not familiar. There's so much stuff through the private news network or whatever that you hear in the Army about sole surviving son, this kind of thing. So did the deployment end for you right there?
Pretty much, yeah. So after that firefight was over, they called in some helicopters to. We had a few wounded, no serious injuries. It was more like rolled ankles, that type of thing. Who needed to get evacuated out of there, and me. They're like, you know what, you need to get not here, basically, and so they flew me back to Bagram, and that I met with the brigade leadership there, and they obviously knew what happened to my brother. They were the brigade was like headquartered out of Vermont, so they were familiar, probably before anyone else, with what was happening. And I asked, could I call home? And I had been very unfamiliar with the whole casualty notification process up until this point. And they're like, no, you can't. And I'm like, the fuck? Yes, I can. Like, just get me a phone and I can show you. I can use a phone and I could dial home. Like, no, that you can't. And the reason why um, is because due to the time difference, your parents probably haven't been notified yet. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, that would be a pretty crappy way to find out that their son was killed by a phone call like that from me, in the condition that I was in. So I'm like, okay, cool, I got it. Um, do you know when they're going to be notified? And they're like, no, we don't, because again, time difference.
It's like what, a 9.5 hour time difference. It's a
It was.
weird time difference.
There
There's a
was a
half
half
an
an
hour
hour there.
in
I think it was
there,
eight
and
and a
it's
half.
it's fucking
Yeah.
weird. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's
and
weird.
so this was already evening in Afghanistan, like probably dinner time. Like I don't remember exactly what time. I remember dinner time because I remember they escorted me over to the chow hall, and like they're like, yeah, you need to eat some food, and I was like, I don't want to eat food. Like,
Of
like,
course.
I don't want
Yeah.
anything. Like, I just want to be sad and angry and all that. So I remember it was around that time. So plus 8 hours, middle of the night, and back home, give or take time period. I forget exactly when. Um, so yeah, no one was going to knock on the door at like 3 o'clock in the morning, basically. Um, so I had to wait, and I was like, cool, I'll just call the next day. Next day comes around, they still didn't know, uh, so I wasn't able to call the next day either. And so I'm like, great. But they said, we're getting you home, and I'm like, there. I said, well, I want to escort him all the way home, and any other veteran out there knows you never leave a fallen soldier, right? And in my mind, not only was this a fallen soldier, it was my brother. So, like, hell no, I am not leaving him. I want to be with him. I want to be with him the whole time, and I want to escort him the entire way from Afghanistan to our doorstep, or wherever. Not our doorstep, because he didn't actually make it to our doorstep, but you know what I mean, to the the funeral home in.
to Dover, and then from Dover to, back to Vermont or
Exactly.
Connecticut or wherever he's going to be, services,
Yeah,
all that
exactly.
good stuff.
I
I'm
wanted
with
to
you.
follow them the whole way, and they're like, "No." I'm like, "There's a lot of no's going on here, and I'm not liking this."
Yeah,
And
right. Like, come the fuck
and
on
so
here.
I I was like, "Okay, well, why?" And they're like, "Well, what are you really gonna do for him, while you're escorting him?" There's always gonna be somebody with him, but what are you gonna do for him versus what could you do for your family back home? Your family is worried about you. They want you home, all that. And I'm like, okay, fine. I hate it, but I get it. Um, uh, it just boiled under my skin. I was like, I feel so wrong about this, but they
It still doesn't make sense to me, honestly. Like, it's not about what you're gonna do for him, it's about what it's gonna do for you, right? Like, I think that's an even bigger thing that maybe, I don't know, I think maybe the higher ups kinda lose sight of that, because if you've been around any kind of special operations forces or whatever, they escort their brothers and sisters home, right? Like, from, the time it happens to, whenever wherever they're going, they're right by their side, and it's like, why wouldn't they let that happen for you? Because 'Cause you're a conventional army or
it
National
was
Guard
pretty
guy?
much they did say they only allow like special forces to do stuff like that. And I was that was the response that I got, and I was like, I don't get it. Like, how are they different? I mean, I know how they're different from me. Trust me, I'm not trying to compare myself to a Navy
Well,
SEAL,
honestly,
but
yeah, but the thing is that what makes them different is the budget that they have to do better training, and they did a harder assessment and selection. Honestly, that's what makes them different is money.
okay, yeah, sure, yeah, and so it just the whole thing irked me, right? But at that point, the fight was taken out of me. Like I was just in such a just dark, miserable place that I was just like, you know what, fuck it, whatever. Just get me home. If that's where I'm going, just get me home. And so I was able to escort him out of Afghanistan to Kuwait. That was his first stop. And so I was on the flight. There was uh, the ramp ceremony that I was able to be a part of, which I had never been a part of something like that before. And it was actually really interesting to see just how many people came out to pay their respects. For folks who aren't familiar with what a ramp ceremony is, it's kind of like a wake before a funeral kind of thing, or even like a mini funeral kind of thing, where people just come out and they pay their respects. They, if they're religious, they say a prayer. They come over and since I happen to be family of uh, my brother there, they came over, they offered their condolences to me, and there were people from Poland, from I think Germany. There were all ranks of soldiers and airmen and Marines, and just people came out, and I was like, this actually felt good to be a part of this. So I'm kind of glad I had that experience. Oh, I got to back up a second. There's something I had mentioned earlier for a reason. I forgot to fill in the reason why I mentioned it. When we were on that mission before my brother was killed, I told you about that general who got off the helicopter and got that call that there were two KIA. Um, well, it turns out one of the two was my brother. Didn't know at the time because there's no names given on the radio. But when the helicopter landed to take me out of there, that general was on the same helicopter, and he was sitting like it was a like he was sitting facing me, and I was facing him, kind of thing, on the helicopter. And he looked at me like I was familiar, like, don't I know you, kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, I was the guy who helped land the helicopter earlier. Um, and I said, yeah, do you remember those two KIA that you got the call on the radio? Because he was wondering, like, I looked fine, like I didn't have any injuries. He's like, why are you here? I was like, those two KIA, one of them was my brother. And he's like, holy shit, I can't believe the coincidence. Like, I just happened to be standing next to the brother of the guy. Thank God they didn't use names on the radio. Otherwise, who knows how I would have lost it. Um, but anyway, so I kind of took a detour there because I wanted to fill in that blank there. But yeah, so I had the ramp ceremony, got on that flight, um, and they let me choose my seat, and I sat the closest seat to the case that he was in, the transfer case that my brother was in. Don't know why. It just felt like I needed to be there, like a big brother protector kind of thing. And I just stared at at the box he was in. Like if anyone so much as sneezed near it, I was going to probably rip their face off, kind of thing. Because I still had that anger and rage racing through me, and I needed to do something with it. And thank God nobody even like remotely came close to doing anything disrespectful. Everyone was completely respectful. It was actually wonderful. But um, yeah, come landed in Kuwait, and they brought me to um, some office somewhere. I don't even know where. Um, and I was like, "Can I call my family now?" And this is a full 20 over 24 hours after finding out that my brother was killed. Uh, I still hadn't had a chance to call home, and they're like, "Yes, we received notification that your parents were notified. You can call home." And I'm like, "Sweet," but I have no way of calling home. I had no calling cards. I had no, nothing like that. People just were throwing calling cards at me. They're like, just take it, use it, And so I was like, all right, sweet. Um, so called home, called my parents first, and they were happy to hear that I was on my way home, but obviously they were in rough shape, and you could hear it in their voices, like they were distraught, understandably, right? And I called my wife, and when I called her, she was in the car on the way to go over to my parents' house because she had just found out herself, and so she had packed up my son and our dog, and she was like, "I'm just going to go over there. I'm going to try to help them in any way that I can." And so she was going over there, and I didn't really have much time to talk to either of them. I think I probably only 15 minutes between the two of them, as far as the call home. But uh, as far as military travel time goes, I got home in like record pace, because my brother was killed the day before. Uh, I was in Kuwait the next day, uh, and usually you're waiting for a flight out of Kuwait for at least a few days, if not longer, right? They had me on a flight out of Kuwait that same day that I arrived in Kuwait, and um, so yeah, Kuwait to Germany, Germany to Atlanta, Atlanta back up to Connecticut, and so I was home really quickly after all of that. So um, yeah, that's kind of the journey that I took and how I got there. Fast forward a little bit to the funeral, my brother's funeral. So for folks who aren't familiar, the National Guard, like regular Army, the commander in chief is the president of the United States. Well, the National Guard, um, in addition to the president, there's also the governor of whatever state your National Guard is in is like the commander in chief, so that the governor can command the National Guard troops. And that's typically when you see like hurricanes, natural disasters, and the National Guard is called out. That's the governor doing that type of work. Um, so at my brother's funeral, the governor of the state of Connecticut came to the funeral, and she told our family that she was going to order that I not go back to Afghanistan. And so that was it for my deployment. I initially, I was only given 10 days, I think, of leave, or 2 weeks or something like that. I forget what it was, to come home for the funeral. Um, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going back. I don't know how I'm going to survive going back there. And when she said that, it was a relief, not just for me, but like for my whole family. They were like, good, we don't have to worry about doing this all over again. You know what I mean? So
You don't go back to Afghanistan. You're probably towards the end of your contract at this point,
yeah,
right?
getting pretty close to the end. Um, it was at the time that I came home, I probably had like a year and a couple months left on my enlistment. Um, yeah, it was like the November of the next year was when my enlistment was going to be up. So getting pretty close. One thing I failed to mention earlier was that same day, that mission where I found out that my brother was killed, getting off the helicopter at night, I actually fell off the helicopter and damaged my knee pretty badly. I was able to walk around, but I was in a lot of pain throughout that whole day. And of course, the CO tells me to take a knee,
Take
and I
a
was
knee.
like, "Fuck,
Yeah,
that's the
of
last thing I want to do."
yeah.
You know, carrying all this equipment around all day, and now take a knee. God damn. So, anyways, um, uh, a few months after getting back home, I went and ended up getting surgery on my knee, and the recovery for that surgery was going to basically be through the end of my enlistment. Like it would have. I was going through physical therapy up till like the end of that enlistment, walking on crutches the whole time. As an infantryman, you're not really effective when you're on crutches. And so I continued going to drill, the drill weekends. The guys were out in the field, and I was just sitting there watching them. I couldn't do anything. And so I felt like an absolute piece of shit at that point. It's like I served with these guys. I was overseas with these guys just a few months ago. I was in Afghanistan with these guys, and I can't do anything with these guys anymore. Um, and I was like, what am I even doing here? This doesn't make any sense. And so I looked into like, is there a way for me to get out of the military now and just like say, look, it's been real, it's been fun, but I'm done, kind of thing. And I found in the Army regulations, there's something called the surviving sons and daughters, which I think is what you're getting at earlier, as far as you know people still serving after losing someone like that. And I think there's a lot of misconception, especially with movies like Saving Private Ryan, where they go and find the guy and
Send a team to go
yeah,
pull
pull me
you
out.
out. Yeah.
Technically,
Yeah.
yes, they sent me home from there. Yeah, but they didn't have to. I could have still been staying there, or they could have sent me home and then sent me right back too. Um, there was nothing saying that they had to send me and keep me home. Um, but the surviving sons and daughters is something more voluntary on my part, where anyone who has lost a loved one, a family member, the way in the same circumstances like I described, basically, in military service, it didn't have to be in combat, but it could have been, a training accident or any number of different things. Um, any other family member can request, an early discharge at that point. And so that's what I did. I put in that request, sent it up my chain of command. They actually tried to bribe me to stay in with a promotion, which I was like, that I don't really care about the rank or any of that. Like, I don't want to stay in, and I'm quite frankly, you don't want me to stay in, because at that point, I wasn't of going to be a very good soldier. And definitely not
You're
a
not
good
in a
leader.
good
You
place at
didn't you
all.
didn't want me in a
Right.
higher position of authority, because I was looking around like, any infantry guys out there who might be listening to this, like, you got a packing list to go out for, a field exercise or whatever, and it's got, socks and uniform, another pair of boots, or whatever in the thing. And I was looking around at my guys, like, I couldn't go out with them, but I was still like making sure they had all their stuff. And I was looking like, dude, you're a grown ass man. If you don't have this stuff, I don't give a shit. Like, go, don't go. I take it, don't take it. I don't care. Um, and there were reasons that they had this stuff on the packing list, but I didn't really care. And I was like, this isn't the leadership that these guys need. They need a better someone who actually gives a shit right now. And I was not that guy. So yeah, I was like, this is best for me, for the Army, for the soldiers that I would be in charge of, best for my family as well. And so, I at that point kind of went our separate ways. I think I put the paperwork in like April, and it wasn't until June that I heard back from them with any sort of response. And I'm like, all right, dude, let's figure this out, because I don't want to keep this going, forever. So Yeah.
So let's talk about the transition. And your transition is a little bit different than a lot of the people we've had on the show because most of them are active duty, not coming from the guard. You still had a job, I assume, at an account. Was it the accounting
Yeah, so
job
I
still
I
that
had
you had?
actually switched jobs at that point. I was working for an insurance company before I deployed, and still doing like finance type stuff, but I was working for the insurance company, and they were great. Before I deployed, they were like anything we could do to help you, your family, anything like that. They were wonderful with all that. Um, when I got back home, my boss was a former Air Force guy, and uh, he's uh, he called me and he told me, um, "Look, we're not expecting you back until November." This was August, and he goes, "We're not expecting you back until November, anyways, because your orders say through November, and that's when we were expecting you back. So I don't expect you back until November." And I was like, "Wow, that's pretty amazing." That he was that cool thing because he knew I needed time to kind of get my head right and all that kind of stuff. Um, and when I finally did go back, um, God, I hated it. I couldn't stand going into work, uh, sitting in a cubicle all day, um, working on reports that I was like, this doesn't, quite frankly, it doesn't matter. If I do a stellar job at this, if I make the best spreadsheet in the world, or if I don't, who cares? Like I that was just kind of the attitude I had with all of it. And it was just a drag to get me out of bed every morning. It was like, what am I even doing going to this job? I hated it.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of other things that are going on. You're trying to process and deal with the grief of your brother, which the army doesn't do us a good job of teaching us how to deal with loss. It's like what you said earlier, right? Like you were supposed to go back to Afghanistan and finish the deployment after losing your brother. They could have made you do that, and they did not make you do that. So I imagine now you're out of the army. You're still dealing with, all the grief, the compartmentalization, taking care of your family, your wife, your young kid, the drinking, the angry outbursts, right? You even said you lasted about a month or two in your job after returning from
That's right. Yeah.
Afghanistan.
Yeah. So it was like late November or so. Like it was just before Thanksgiving that I went back. Um, and then we had a few days off for Thanksgiving, came back like December. I was there and it was like mid-January. I was like, I can't do it anymore. And I think by the end of January or early February or something like that, I was done. And so um fortunately, my dad, he had a consulting company and he offered a job to me there. And so I was able to do some work for him at that company. Um, but again, it was like I was leaving one place and going to another with the same situation.
Right. No
No
sense
sense
of
of purpose
purpose.
really. I was doing the job, but it was just checking boxes to me. And it was like I didn't really care. I didn't know I at that point, there's very little that I actually truly cared about, and it was just like you said, the drinking, the anger. I just nothing was lining up right for me. Everything was just so difficult to process. Even the smallest little things that would happen, um, I I would just react like go from like 0 to a thousand in my reaction and for like little things like little minor inconveniences, and it was like that's stupid. Like you shouldn't have to kind of act that
Yeah,
way.
the traffic light's taking too long to turn fucking green. I'm fucking losing my mind. Why am I losing my mind? So leaving the job where you found no sense of purpose to go into your dad's consulting firm where you had no sense of purpose. This is kind of my favorite part. I can't lie because I started this show with the idea that the path back to purpose is through entrepreneurship. And that's exactly what you did. You decided to find purpose and start your own business. So let's talk about that because I'm really interested. You didn't mention what business that you started and then sold, and then now you're doing what you're doing with the Drive On podcast and your book and all that stuff. So how did you arrive at the same conclusion that I ultimately arrived at? And the path back to purpose is through
Yeah. So
entrepreneurship.
initially, the first business that I started, after all that, I still was working for my dad, but it was kind of like part time at this point, because I was just like, uh, I'll help you out here and there, but it wasn't fulfilling. It was kind of just like I was doing it for a little side income kind of thing. It was not much. So in the meantime, I found, like you just mentioned, that starting a business kind of gave me a sense of purpose and meaning and direction, and I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It gave me something. And the first business I started, actually, probably sounds a little bit crazy, but actually, I thought it was a pretty good idea. So when you go traveling and you have to have like the you can't bring like a full bottle of shampoo or whatever. You got to have those little travel size things like that, the
The
little 3 ounce
3 ounce
things.
travel bottles.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
what I did, I started a business. It was basically just selling those types of products. And what I would do is, when you ordered your whatever your products is, say you want, shampoo and your toothpaste and your, whatever, um, I would ship it right to your hotel, so you didn't have to deal with the hassle of taking it out of your bag at the airport, and maybe it busts open in your bag and it gets all over your stuff, and it's a big mess. And by the end of the week, after you're done with your trip, you're pretty much done with those things anyways. You toss them, and then you don't have to worry about bringing them back home. And so you never have to worry about that hassle at the airport. So that was kind of the
This is a genius idea, by the way. I like this.
so
Is
it
awesome.
actually ended up in Entrepreneur Magazine as one of their 100 brilliant companies. I think I got the thing on the wall. Yeah, 100 brilliant companies to watch. It was one of the companies, and so it did pretty well. Like it was. I mean, it wasn't like it blew up into like a huge thing, but I wasn't looking for anything huge. I was looking for something to provide for my family. I was looking to, just have something to do
Something that's
that's mine.
yours,
Yeah,
maybe, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something I could build and I could be proud of. Like I just looked over on the wall. Like I just remembered, like I still have the magazine framed on the wall over there. Like, yeah, it's pretty cool. Like I didn't even know. I just started getting phone calls from people. It was like, hey, we read about your business in the magazine. I'm like, what magazine? Like Entrepreneur Magazine. I was like, you're shitting me. Like come on. Like it's not in there. And then sure enough, I went to go to the store because I was like, okay, maybe it actually is. And I went to the store and I see this thing. The magazine had Richard Branson's face on the cover, and I said 100 brilliant companies. I'm like, okay, well, I flipped through and I went to the travel section, and sure enough, there it was. I was like, holy crap. They like didn't want to give me a heads up or anything. Like it was going to be in the magazine. So it did pretty good for what it was. And um, as I was doing that, I was basically doing it all bootstrapped, doing it all myself. I built the website. I was fulfilling orders. I was doing everything, and it got to be a lot of work to do all that stuff on your own, right? But I started to notice, like, I really enjoyed the website, the technology side of things, and uh, like I didn't really care so much for the order fulfillment and the customer service and all that other crap that goes along with it, and shipping boxes out, through the mail or whatever. Like that stuff was not something that I really uh, cared for. Um, but I really did enjoy the the technology side of things. So I was like, well, why don't I build websites for other businesses, other entrepreneurs who, um, they need the e-commerce, they need even if it's just like a landing page with a contact form or something like that, they need something. So like I know how to do that, and I got pretty good at it. And so I was like, why don't I do that as my business instead? So I moved. I closed that other business because it was getting to be more than I could handle, and wasn't making enough for me to start hiring people to fulfill all this stuff. So I was like, you know what? it was good while it lasted. Got my feet wet in the entrepreneur space, um, and then I started doing the website stuff. Um,
Well, and I think this is awesome, man, because what you're describing here is you took a chance on yourself to step outside of the norm and do something that I don't know. I feel like most veterans are never even offered or told that entrepreneurship is something that they could pursue. Nobody ever taught me. I'm sure I don't know. Your dad maybe kind of influenced you because he's got a consulting business, but it was never really presented to me in a way, right? And through that process, you had a little bit of success, so you got to taste what it's like. It's possible, right? You're building something that's yours, but in that process, you discovered something that you're actually passionate about in building websites, right? For me, I hate all of that shit. I like this part of it, right? Like this is the part of my business that I love so much is talking to other veterans, talking to people, booking guests, counseling, transitioning veterans. That's what I'm great at. And then I have people behind me that are better at the building of the websites, the crafting of the email marketing stuff, the branding, the brand strategy, all of that, right? And so I just wanted to pause you there because I do think that it's important for veterans who are first listening to the show and being introduced to entrepreneurship as a route back to purpose when they get out. Through the process, maybe you have no idea what you're doing, and that's the case for a lot of building a business, right? You just don't fucking know. You have no idea. But what you do is you discover pieces of yourself and different areas. I think there's like in my mind there's like 7 different areas to entrepreneurship that you need to really know to be successful, but you discover something about yourself in one of those 7 areas where you're super passionate about it, resonates with you, and it doesn't feel like work. You're genuinely happy to get up every day and do it and have a lot of fun with it. And is that what building
it
websites was
it
for you?
was, yeah, and so it kind of was a bit of a journey. So it started off, I was kind of on a high, even though like so the very first month, I remember I started the business, and the very first month I had one client, and I don't know, I did not make a lot of money that month, and I was like, "What am I doing?" The doubt started setting in, and I was like, "This is." Luckily, I had some money in savings and stuff, so it wasn't like I was, you know, not able to provide for the family or anything like that. Like we were okay for a little bit, but it had too many more months like that. It was going to start going downhill real south, real quick, um, and that was not going to be good. So I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. And so next month I had a few more clients, and then the month after, a few more, and it started building, upon itself, and then there was a little bit of the word of mouth, and then I started figuring out, okay, well, websites, for people who aren't technically inclined, websites, um, yeah, building them is great. That's one thing, but there's also the ongoing maintenance of the website. And so I started, um, just figuring I could sell maintenance plans to people, and just like a monthly fee, and I'll take care of all the, any updates or any of the technical crap that comes up during the month. I'll just take care of it for them. And that's when I started getting into figuring out like automation. A lot of things, I was able to automate, and I could have one website that I was maintaining, or I could have 1,000, and the amount of work that was put into it from my end was the same, as far as the maintenance and the update side, because I was able to automate a lot of the processes that I would do, and so, um, there really was no limit to the number of websites that I could take on as a client. Now, bigger problems start coming up, and yes, maybe there is actually in reality a limit, but in theory there was no limit to that. So I was able to bring in, a lot more clients that way. And I was continuing to build websites too, but the maintenance side started to balloon and get bigger, but I wasn't having to do a ton of work for each maintenance client. Like, it was just regular routine maintenance that would just happen on a schedule, because I set up a system and that just did it. Um, and so one other thing that I found that I was enjoying was just dabbling in the code, like the back end code of the websites. And so
That was gonna be my next question is did you start building websites? Like, my experience with building websites and what really turned me off was WordPress and using Elementor. I fucking hated that whole thing. Like, they say it's user friendly and easy and it should make sense. It didn't to me. And then since I learned, right, like there's things you can do like building wireframes and then Figma and then take it over to Webflow. So what was your progression with designing
The
and building
vast majority of the
websites?
websites that I worked with were WordPress websites. So it's funny that you mentioned that. So you're the exact type of person that I would be targeting for like the maintenance,
Absolutely,
like because you'd be like,
100%, and I would have paid you.
just take this off my plate. I don't want to do this. Exactly. That you were the ideal persona for the type of person I was looking for. Like that.
And I'm not embarrassed
No,
to
and you
admit
shouldn't be,
that,
and,
right?
like,
Like,
nobody should be because everybody's got strengths in different areas, and you probably have strengths in areas that I would be like, I don't even know what you're talking about because, like, it just
right,
over my
right,
head,
right.
and I would be like, "Okay, how much do I need to pay you so that you could just do this for me and I don't have to think about it?" And but that's the beauty about having a business is think about any business that just think about like 5 miles away from your house, wherever you live. I don't care where you live in the country, unless you're like way out in the woods. But any business that's nearby, think about like the closest business. They have somebody who works at that business or started the business who knows how to do something that you don't know how to do, and they are only in business. Well, I take that back. They either know how to do something that you don't know how to do, or they can do something that you're not willing to do, right? So I could figure out how to do all the maintenance on my car. But with all the computers and other shit in the car these days, it's not like you're working on a 1970s era, car anymore. There's
Like, we
right.
grew up,
There's
right?
so
Yeah,
much stuff
no.
that goes into car maintenance. I'm going to take it to someone who knows how to do it. And a half hour after I bring my car in, it's done, and I'm on the road, and I'm on my way, and it's beautiful, right? Because of exactly what we're talking about here is like they know how to do it and they can do it quick, and they probably have processes in place that let them do it really quickly, and they can get a lot more cars in that way when they have those processes in place. So um, just like how I was able to have a bunch of maintenance clients that just happened automatically, the maintenance was on my end, very little effort. Um, that freed up my time to now be able to start dabbling more in the code of things. And you mentioned some stuff like with WordPress, and not to get into technical details, but I started making plugins for websites of uh, basically things that were I found myself doing frequently on these websites, or I found other people were asking for these things frequently. I was like, okay, let's just make this into something that I can package up and I can sell to people. And so I started doing that, and I started like going out into message boards and just checking out like what are people looking for, and I started building solutions around what they were looking for.
This is so good, man. This is so good because all you did was you identified problems that you had, created a fix for that problem, and then looked elsewhere. Well, if I have this problem, what are some other problems that people have? And you pointed to it: message boards, Reddit, Quora, Medium. You can find, especially with like something like Perplexity AI. Now you can go ask it a question. For me, it's like, what are transitioning veterans asking the internet right now, and I get a list of problems to solve, and it's
Exactly.
great.
Yeah. I wish there was some sort of AI tool back then that could have just streamlined and automated all of this type of stuff. Again, I love the automation side of things. Um, and so I was just building solutions. Some of them were scratching my own itch. Like I built a CRM that I could use for my own clients, and I was like, well, there might be other people out there who could use it for their clients, and so I started selling that. I started selling things that help people with their e-commerce platform. I just went all in on that type of stuff, and it got to the point where I was focusing more of my time and my energy and my attention on the software development side of things than I was on the maintenance side of things. And um, I felt like I was not giving it the maintenance side of things the attention that it deserved. And so eventually, kind of the maintenance side of things kind of fell off, which was fine because my heart wasn't there really anymore. Like it was good. It was paying the bills at the time, but it wasn't what I really truly wanted to do. I
Well, and this is really cool because you did enjoy it for a time, and then it was time to move on because you discovered something in that process that you were more passionate about. And while we're on it, like, do you think that this helped with your transition? Did the drinking slow down because you found more purpose in the work that you were doing? Did you start to be able to deal better with, the mental health side of things, and the grief and the PTSD, and I'm sure some TBIs in there, and all of that? Did you find through the process of learning about yourself and entrepreneurship that stuff got
You know, I
easier?
don't I don't know, I haven't really thought of it that way. I had been going through, therapy quite a bit, during throughout this whole process. So, I always just kinda chalked up any improvements to the therapy, but I never really thought of how entrepreneurship could have been the therapy I was missing, that at least a sense of purpose, right? And that's a big thing I think for transitioning veterans is just not having a sense of purpose. When your purpose used to be something like defending the country, that's a pretty damn big purpose, right? And then all of a sudden you flip the switch and you take the uniform off and you're no longer that person. You're now a veteran. What the hell is a veteran? Like I can wrap my head around a soldier. Soldier's a guy who goes out and he's a rough and tough guy and he goes and he defends the country, right? Um, but a veteran is he's like X that, like he used to be that, but he's not anymore. Like, all right, well, that not doesn't sound quite as cool, but sure. Um, and so now it's like, who are you? What are you? And I got to build who I was, and what I did. You go up to anybody, you meet somebody at a party or something like that. "Oh, what do you do?" Like, that's, like, usually, like, one of the first questions. "What do you do?" "I'm a
That's the
doctor,
first
I'm a,
question. Yeah,
architect,
because
I'm a teacher, I'm a whatever." That's usually one of the first questions that comes out, and maybe it's just our society, but that's how we kinda define who we are, and I was me. Like, that's I think that the takeaway from that was I was me. I f you know, fail or succeed, it was me, behind this. I throughout this whole time, by the way, I had no employees. It was 100% me. I outsourced some things, like had third-party contractor type thing, but I had no employees. Um, and so everything really fell on me. Everything from customer service to the actual nuts and bolts of developing the software, and that was all on me. Um, and when you're an entrepreneur, you got to wear a lot of hats. Especially in the early days. You're unless you're going into it with other partners who bring other strengths to the table, that you got to wear a lot of hats. But I think one of the keys to success is figuring out early what you're good at and what you're not good at, and do more of the stuff that you're good at, and eliminate, if you can, the things that you're not good at. Like just get rid of those things, or if you can't eliminate them, find somebody else who's good at that and hire that person. Even if it's a contractor, like a third party thing, if it's a thing that needs to be done every once a month or something like that, give them that work once a month, but it's not like a thing that has to be done all the time. So um but I think, to me, one of the things that helped me was when I started letting go of some of those things, and I started bringing on support staff, and I started, getting that type of thing. So, eventually that business, where I had the software that I was developing, there's a guy that I met at a conference a few years ago, and he was he had a business that had a similar target market to the business that I had. Um, different products. Like he was more on the building the website and that type of thing, which I was not doing any longer. I was doing more of the software side. And so he was like, "Is there any way that we can partner and we can come together and we can sell your software to our clients, and you can help us sell the websites to the people who, or at least maintenance type stuff to the people that you have, coming in buying your product." And so we did a partnership for a little while, but somewhere along that line, my passion for all of that started to fade, and I was like, this is just not what I want to be doing anymore. And so I ended up selling my share of that business to my partners, and got out. And uh, I think it was just a good way to kind of close that chapter. Really,
How did it feel when you sold your shares? Was it a good feeling? I can imagine that it's a good feeling to I don't know, reap the reward of all the hard work that you had put in, because it is a ton of hard work, man, and it is your baby, and you do care about it
yeah.
until you don't, right? Like
It,
you
it was one of
said.
those, I guess you can call it like bittersweet kind of moments, because yeah, getting paid for your work and everything, obviously that's a nice thing. But at the same time, it was my baby. Uh, like I remember staring at the screen, a blank screen, had no code on it, and I started typing, and I'm like, "Okay, well, now this is gonna be a thing." And I started making
Yeah,
this
yeah.
into a program, and my gosh, how much easier would it have been if I had all the AI tools that are available today that can, like, just basically build the thing. You just describe it, and it just builds it for you, you know? Um,
Well, but that's just it. Now you have the ability to recognize with the tools, if you ever are in a pinch, man, SaaS, micro SaaS in particular, is so big right now. It's like the next thing, right? Like you could go develop another one if you wanted to, if
and
you were.
and getting it out there and selling it and everything, and just figuring it out, like, but along the way I developed a lot of systems and dabbled with a lot of automation tools and things like that to help just streamline things, so I didn't have to do things more than once. And I was very big on that. Like, if I have to do something, I'm going to do it, but if at all possible, I don't ever want to do it again. Now, obviously, answering a customer support question, yeah, someone's gonna write a question into me, whatever, I'm gonna have to respond to that. But there are tools that can pre-fill in a response. Yeah, because very often the questions that I would get were the same questions. And so, like, it would pre-fill the response. But even better than that, I would go to my website and I'd have, like, frequently asked questions kind of thing, or support
Well,
document.
so, and I was just going to comment on that because, websites didn't used to have a FAQ, and now it's like mandatory. A FAQ needs to be a part
And
of your
so I
website, right?
started noticing, like, okay, I'm getting common questions on all this stuff. Um, let me let me just put the answer to the question on the website. And guess what? Those questions stopped coming in. So now I don't have to answer those questions anymore. On occasion, a random person might do it here and there, but it was nowhere near it cut the frequency down to almost nothing. And so I started doing that type of stuff and just like noticing, what am I doing and what can I do less of? Like, I don't want to keep doing those things over and over again. I want to do it once and then never do it again, if at all possible, right? So I just kept playing with that, and I just love those kind of automation type tools. And what I'm doing now, so after I sold my shares of the business, obviously I have my podcast, but my podcast is, because we had mentioned that earlier, but my podcast is not, paying the bills. It's not a huge money generator type thing. So I got to keep the lights on, keep food on the table, keep the wife and kids happy, all that kind of stuff. So, but what I do now is, um, I actually went back and am working for my father's consulting company. Um, and what the company does is, helps, uh, basically, the processes that businesses have, they just reduce the waste that is in a lot of business process. And just to give you a quick example, if you ever bought a piece of furniture from a furniture store, a lot of times they say, okay, well, it'll take 6 to 8 weeks to deliver the couch or the table or whatever. And it doesn't actually take the manufacturer of that piece of furniture 6 to 8 weeks to build that piece of furniture. It just takes that 6 to 8 weeks to get it to you. And so the reason why is because a lot of times they produce things in huge batches, where they'll make, like, one week they'll make all couches, and then the next week they'll make all tables, and then the next week they'll make all you know something else, a TV stand or something. They make other things, and they make them in these huge batches, and they're very inflexible in that way. So if you're ordering a couch and you want a different fabric on the couch than the couches that they have in inventory, well, you're gonna have to wait for that next round of production of couches to come through after they've gone
Yeah.
through everything else. So that's why it takes so long for that to be done. And so what we do is we try to work with companies to streamline everything and work on what we call, like, one piece flow. So one one order for a couch comes in, and that one couch is now being worked on, and that's the couch that then goes out the door that later that day, and it's in your living room the next day or something like that. We try to bring certain things you can't really control, like if it takes 3 days to ship it from the factory to, I mean, we're not going to break traffic laws, speeding and all that kind of stuff. We safety first, obviously, but we do that to kind of just reduce the amount of time, from the amount of time that it actually takes to make the product, whatever that time is. It probably only takes a couple hours to make the couch, and reduce that 8 weeks down to as close as we can to that couple hours. So that theoretically you could have that couch by the end of the day.
Which is awesome, because it frustrates me to no end that I have to pay $5,000 up front for my bedroom and living room set and wait 8 weeks to get it. It's like, come on, guys. Like, there's one on the floor right now. Sell me that one. Like, come the fuck on. Like, and I imagine that's probably great for your customers that you're doing that for too, because now you have happier end users, right, who are going to come back to you on a more regular basis because they're not having to wait that 6 or 8 weeks to get
And
their
that's exactly
furniture.
the thing that we try to drive home to these clients of ours, is that you could even have a commodity product, something that the only thing you're really competing on is price, because no one really sees the difference in these things. Um, for example, there's one company, they made like temperature control things, like for your air conditioning type thing. Yeah, yes,
Thermostats,
that's the word
yeah.
I was looking for. That um, they made those types of products, which I, without looking on the wall, I couldn't tell you who manufactured the one that I have in my house, right? I don't know, and I, quite frankly, I don't care. But if I need to replace one, I'm going to go to the store and I'm going to look at them, and I'm probably just pick it based on price, because unless I'm looking for some fancy features or whatever, but I'm looking for something basic, I'm going based on price. Um, but for the Home Depots and the other hardware stores that sell these types of products, they want they don't want to be waiting 6 or 8 weeks for an order for those things. If their shelf is empty, they want to fill it right now.
They need them.
Right.
They need
They
them
need them
today.
today,
Yeah.
tomorrow at the
Yeah.
latest, right? But yesterday was better, is when they want them, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
um, so they're going to go and place the orders with the companies who are able to fulfill those orders really quickly. And so they don't have to carry huge inventory of whatever the products are. They want to be able to say, okay, we're out of this product. I'm going to submit the order, and maybe it'll even be here later today, that type of thing. It just got off the manufacturing line this morning, and here it is in the afternoon. That type of thing is kind of what we do with that. And yeah, so companies are going to place orders with those companies that aren't making them wait forever. Doesn't matter what the products are. Any business can benefit from that type of stuff. And I've taken that mindset that I've been working with all these years, with trying to streamline processes and automate things if I can. And importantly, what we try to tell people is, don't automate waste. Don't like if there's waste in a product process, you're just going to amplify. You're just going to get more waste. So try to streamline the process as best you can, and then work in automation, and it just makes everything a whole lot more efficient.
So is this fulfilling that? Is that scratching the itch and giving you the purpose that you are looking for, and you're pretty
You know,
passionate about this
this is
at this
something
point?
that it kind of combines different things from my past too, and it it to me, when you look at a process, doesn't matter what the process is, and you're able to identify, like, yeah, you definitely don't need to be doing that 1,000 times. Like, don't do that again. Like, and you look at that. To me, it's just like, you when you start doing that, you start seeing it everywhere, and it's a bit of a curse too, because you start seeing it everywhere. You go, waiting in line at, you know Chipotle or wherever, I don't know, wherever you get your food, um, and you're seeing how they make the food, and sometimes it's just like, "Oh my god, why are you doing that again? I saw you do that for the last 5 customers that came through, and you're now doing it again. Why do you keep doing that? Why do you keep doing that?" Or God, the TSA at the airport could be.
I was going to use Walmart as an example. You got 47 fucking aisles and they're pushing everybody to the self checkout, standing in line. You're watching people leave their shit in the middle of the aisle because they don't want to stand in line to check out if you've got 50 open registers with no employee at it, right? Like, this is a bad system and I don't know what the hell you guys are doing. There's no reason for this. To save a couple bucks, you'd probably make more money.
Exactly, and the thing is, like, then you're relying on people, like, in that case, you're relying on people to know their system, know how their particular cash register works, and the checkout system, and then you go to the grocery store, and you got the same thing, and then you go to, CVS, and you got the same thing, and you go all these different places, all the cash registers are different, they all have different, uh, you know, quirks to them, especially at the grocery store when you have like produce or something, you got to key in the code, or you got to, figure out what is this? Is this is this a large, thing, or is it a medium? I don't know what it is. And you got to figure all that stuff out. The cashiers who are paid to know this stuff, like, they would figure it out, and you would have a whole lot more accurate, checkout thing than me just saying, you know what, it is whatever the hell I say it is, and I click the button.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. So, what's next for you? What future plans and goals do you have for your dad's consulting company? I assume that that's something that you'll probably. It's got to be really cool to work with your dad too. I think that's awesome to have a hand in building, help shape his company and something that'll probably be yours at some
Yeah,
point.
we'll
I
see.
assume.
To me, it's one of those things where every day there's something new, and I think that's one thing that I noticed early on in my career when I was working for the CPA firm, was every day it was almost like Groundhog Day. To me, it felt like every day I was doing the same thing. I was auditing this company's, records, or I was auditing that company's records. I was looking at invoices. I was looking at, spreadsheets. I was looking at this. It felt like it was just the same thing every day. And if it wasn't the same thing every day, it was like, the client from one year to the next, or one quarter to the next, it was like the same thing with those people every single time. And to me, the the monotony of just having the same thing every day, I uh, I hated it. And so, the one nice thing is, that, yeah, we do different things all the time, like different clients, like one. I mean, clients in all different industries. There's medical industry. There's manufacturing, like, big steel, manufacturing type things, and electronics, and all these different things that we work with. And quite frankly, the industry doesn't matter, for whatever it is, that we do. It's really the concepts that we teach are what we, kind of drive home there. So it's, to me, this is a relatively new thing, since I sold my business, a year and a half ago or so. So this is relatively new. So, as far as the future, this is the future right now for me. I don't have, kind of any other direction at this point. We'll see how this goes and where it takes me. But maybe we'll check back in a few years, and I might have an update on that.
Well, and I think too, I think what you're talking about with every day is different is just it's this element of every day is a new opportunity to learn something new, right? I feel like you're probably constantly learning. And I think that's the one thing from all the entrepreneurs I've talked to on this show, my experience, right? Like a lot of people would say, oh, well, you do the same thing every day, which is, it's either editing or it's, talking to people to try and get them to come on the show, or it's recording the show. That's not the same thing every day, right? The conversation is never the same. Like I will not have another conversation like what I've had with Scott DeLuzio today, right? Like there will be elements of the conversation that are similar, but I don't know. And for me, this is very much a hidden agenda. I get to talk to some of the smartest people who are further along in business than I am. And it's like a 2.5, 3 hour masterclass where I get to learn something about business. I had no idea about the furniture industry and why it took 6 to 8 weeks that they were batch running. And it makes sense, logically, if I think about it, like they're changing out dies on the machines that create the couches, right? Like I probably wouldn't have thought that there was a better way to do it. And meeting you and you talking about it, it's like, oh, there is a better way to do it. And I don't need to wait eight
Right.
weeks to get my furniture.
Yeah, and even like you were talking about like editing, like for a podcast. Like I have a podcast too, but I've noticed the process that I go through to put out an episode has evolved over the last few years myself, right? And I've gotten it pretty good. Like I've streamlined quite a bit of it. And I talked about automation too. Even like pre-episode type stuff, like before we even start recording an episode, there is a bunch of stuff that happens that I don't have to do. I did it once, and now I don't have to do it anymore. Just a quick example, like when someone schedules an interview with me, like I have a link that links to my calendar. They put their time in on the calendar. That triggers an automation that sends them an email with, I need your headshot photo. I need like some information. I need all this kind of stuff. I'm going to send that email to every single person that I have as a guest on my show. Why am I going to, first off, yeah, you might say, oh, well, it just takes a minute to write that email. Okay, fine. Just takes a minute. I've had over 400 episodes. So now we're talking, that's 400 minutes of my time that I need to do just for that one task. Now that's if I remember to write that email, right? Now I don't have to remember to do it because it just happens. The only thing that I ever get notified of is exceptions, like when something happens that prevents it from sending that email out. But it does a whole host of other things too, little tiny things that are just now things I'd have to remember to do. And I'd have to do it for every single episode, 400 plus times. I'm going to keep going. This podcast is not done. So, talk 500, 1,000 times. I'm going to have to do this thing over and over and over and over. And like, why would I do that to myself? Why would I make myself have to remember all that stuff and use up so much of my brain space to remember to do that every single time? Um, and so I just figured out ways to streamline all of that stuff. But as I go through, I start noticing just the tiniest little things that I'm like, I'm doing this over and over again too. Maybe there's a way I can automate that so I don't have to do that anymore. And so yeah, they're little things, but when you start making those little changes, they start making big differences, and it frees up your time. And you're like, okay, well, now he's just going to be lazy. He's going to go sit around. No, I'm not sitting around doing nothing with that free time. I'm doing other stuff that I otherwise wouldn't be
Yeah,
able to
moving the
do.
business forward, right? Yep. Yep. No, I totally get it because you filled out a templated email to come on this show, right? Like it's got the link to the calendar to schedule 15 questions, answer these questions. I can then take that and do what I need to do with it. All I need from you is an email address. I go to my saved templates, plug your name in, boom, done. 30 seconds, not even 30 seconds, 15 seconds. And I've just saved myself, like you said, I'm over 70 minutes so far with just people coming on my show, and I know we've only released 7, so there's 10 times more coming, but you're right. You're absolutely right. And we live in an era now where, man, there's so much you can automate to save time, to go focus your energy on things that I call needle movers, right? Like the next evolution of whatever this show is going to be, or the next evolution of whatever your podcast is going to be. And I think that's, I'm glad you're speaking to that, because it's
Yeah,
important.
and so to me is just you know one way. And actually, as we're sitting here talking, like my head is going, and I just thought of another thing. So another little thing I can automate that I now, after we're done, I'm going in and I'm going to figure out, and I'm going to automate this thing so I don't have to do it anymore. And it's just my head keeps going, and so the process is continuously evolving, and it just gets better and better and better the more you do it. It's kind of like a fine wine. The longer you let it age, the better it gets, kind of thing, right? But the more you do something, um, the better you'll get. You'll start to notice these little things. And this, by the way, this is not just podcasting. Like I'm talking about that because it's something we have in common right now. But really, with anything that you do, you'll start to notice these little things that you can do. Like we talked about a mechanic earlier, right? Like I bring my car to the mechanic and he does his thing, right? But the mechanic who might need a wrench or some other tool to work on a car, and he has a toolbox all the way on the other side of the garage, and he's working on a car, and he's like, okay, I need to go get that wrench. And so he goes and he walks all the way over there, and then he walks all the way back to the car, and he does this thing. Oh, I got the wrong wrench. Okay, now I gotta go walk back, and I gotta go get a different wrench. Why doesn't he just move the toolbox closer? Like, why you don't ever have to walk that far again. Like, just bring the toolbox like right to the car, and it's there. You don't have to do, it's that kind of mindset that if more people started doing things that way, like you might seem like, oh man, it's a lot of work. Now I gotta go drag that huge toolbox. I gotta go drag that over here. But you do that once, you'll never have to do these little tiny things. You'll never have to do those things again. And you'll be a whole lot more efficient, a whole lot happier with the type of stuff that you do.
I totally agree, man. Any advice for veterans who are transitioning and are interested in entrepreneurship? What would you say to them? How would you tell them to overcome that fear of stepping outside of their comfort zone and taking a chance on
I think
themselves?
for anybody getting into uh, running the show, I like to call it, like you're running the show at this point. You're the boss, you're the entrepreneur, you own the business, whatever. Um, it is a scary thing. It was scary for me too. When I first started it, and if I start another business at some point down the line, it'd probably be scary for me then too. A couple things. One, if you're going to just dive in head first, like, hats off to you, man. I'm not going to tell you not to, but make sure you got some sort of safety net, some sort of savings. Know that you need, like, however much you spend per month, like on just normal everyday things, have that times, I don't know, at least six or so. Like you want to have like 6 month safety net, because like I said, that first month I had one client when I started my business, and that client only didn't pay me a whole lot either. It was, I think it was only a few $100s that I got paid from that client. So that was not going to be, putting food on the table, that month if I didn't have some sort of safety net, right? So have some sort of safety net. Do it part time. If you don't have that safety net, do it in the evenings, do it on the weekends, do it in your free time. Have another job that can fund this. There was a guest I had on the podcast a while ago. Drawing a blank, honestly, on who it was right now. I wish I could say who it was, but regardless, the message that they said was that the your job, think of your job as funding whatever your passion is. And it doesn't have, if you're not into being an entrepreneur, that's cool, but you probably have some other hobby or some other passion of yours. Think of your job as a thing that can fund that allows you to do the thing that you want to do, so you can have that sense of purpose and joy and happiness, and whatever comes along with that, whatever emotions that makes you feel. Think of your job as a thing that enables that. And if it is starting a business, if that's the thing that you want to do and it's giving you a sense of purpose, great. But if you have no money, that's going to be a problem. So have that job. uh, let it let it fund whatever it is that you're doing, whatever you're building. And as this thing starts to grow, there's going to come a time when you're like, you know what, I can't do both. anymore. I need more time for this. That's when you know it's time to jump ship, I think. And maybe it's going to be different for everyone. But take that leap of faith and bet on yourself. Meanwhile, hopefully you've figured out a way to save some money, so you do have a little bit of a safety net when you do jump ship. But once when the business starts bringing in money, then you're going to be able to, um, uh, you know, for sure be able to kind of predict when it will be that you can kind of walk away from whatever other endeavor you have going on, whatever other job you have going on.
I think that's perfect advice, man. I agree with that 100% because not everybody is in, I frequently talk about, I sold my car, my motorcycle really, and, one vehicle household, structured my finances, paid off debt so that I can focus on doing what I want to do full time. The delayed gratification, the sacrifice in the interim until I'm making the kind of money I want to make. I know I'm going to be able to focus my energy on this, and you're absolutely right. Like, use your job to fund your passion. Like that's that's it right there, right? Like, I think if you start looking at your job like that, you'll quickly realize what's possible and that you don't have to do
Right,
that job
exactly.
forever.
Because I mean, pretty much any job, like traditional job that you're going to have, you're really trading your time, which is like your most valuable resource. You're trading your time for money, and I don't know, like to me, sometimes that's just soul sucking, you know?
It is soul sucking. It's awful. Nobody, I mean, I don't ever want to go back to that. I would rather trade my time for something that's mine. Something. I have a buddy who often refers to to having a job as being on a wage plantation. It's slavery. But he always talks about his issue with a job is he's never going to get close enough to the revenue. Like, you're going to hit a cap where you're going to only get paid so much no matter how much you put in. That is not the case when you start your own thing. However much you put in is however close you get to all
Yeah,
of it.
and the sky's the limit, really, with your your earnings potential at when you're the boss, basically, right? You can make it as big or as little as you want it to be. And when I say that, like, I don't want people to take it the wrong way, because I don't want people to think, like, oh, it's all about the money. Because when I say you can make it as little as you want it to be, um, I really mean that too. As much as I mean you can make it as big as you want it to be, because some people don't want to have this huge multi-million dollar business that's uh you know it takes all their time and all their energy and all their resources. They want to build a business, kind of a lifestyle type thing. They want to build a business that supports their lifestyle, and if they want to be able to travel and they want to be able to spend time with their family and do that type of stuff, well, you don't want to have a job that's going to require 80 hours a week, 80, or more hours a week, and taking all this time. Sometimes you might want something smaller, and that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. But I guess the point is you can make it what you want it to be.
That is the point. That is 100% the point. And you're in the driver's seat. You make the rules. Where you stop is where you stop, and where you go to at the end of the day is where you go to. Um, Man, I really appreciate you being here telling your story. So, how can listeners connect with you? Where can they listen to your podcast at? How can they buy your book to support you? Like I said, I'm about halfway through it. It's a really awesome read for any of you who do like to read. It's an intriguing story. It brought up a lot of feelings and emotions as we talked about, before we started recording here. So just clue the audience in on where they can find you and
Yeah, you
all that
bet.
good
So
stuff, man.
the podcast, first off, is Drive On Podcast, and you can find it at driveonpodcast.com. It's on all the social media if you want to follow, at Drive On Podcast, Instagram, Twitter, or X, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's on YouTube. All the episodes go on YouTube, the video format, and on X. They both go on there. Audio, anywhere wherever you're listening to this show, you can find it there as well. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the usual sources. You can find it wherever. And so yeah, Drive On Podcast is the show. And really, if you're a veteran or somebody who's a veteran and they're dealing with stuff that we were talking about earlier, and they're having trouble with their transition, or they're having just trouble in general. There's so many things outside of the VA, and a lot of that is what we try to cover on the show, and just ways to help people. Anything from alternative forms of therapy to career resources, and just all sorts of things that folks might need post-military. And on the website, everything's broken out into different categories, so hopefully you're not listening. I even like to streamline things for my listeners too. You don't have to go listen to every episode, because not every episode is going to be for you. If you're dealing with job related stuff, there's a section for employment related things, right? Go to that section. Don't waste your time on the other sections that don't have things that are kind of relevant to what you're going through. So figure it out. Look at that. Hopefully there's stuff there for you that can help you or somebody you know. The book, again, is Surviving Son. It's available on Amazon. If you're not a reader, it's cool. I did the audiobook as well, so you can listen to it. And so, yeah, it's in all the different formats: the ebook, audiobook, paperback, hardcover, all those different formats. So, check it out there on Amazon. And that's where you can find it.
Awesome, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Scott DeLuzio. Please don't forget to go like, subscribe, rate, review. Help us get this show in front of 1 million veterans before May 9th, 2025, when I turn 40. I know it's a lofty goal, but I know with the support of our community and what we're capable of, that it's really not that lofty of a goal. Scott, man, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. One last final thought for the audience.
If there is something that you got just like the slightest inkling that like this might be the thing, like for me, like a business, even if it's a hobby, if it's just something, and you're like, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't have the energy, I don't have the resources, I don't have the whatever, just do it and try it and see what happens, what grows from there. You may try something, you may be like, you know what, I was right, this isn't the thing, but try something. And I say this to all the listeners on of my show as well. Like if you're dealing with something, mental health related, or career, whatever, just try something. Try something that might be outside of the norm, and try it to see if that's a thing that will break through whatever you might be going through, and just keep trying. And really, that's, I guess, kind of where the name of the show came from. Just drive on.
Awesome, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott DeLuzio. Thank you so much,
Thanks.
Scott. That's our show, and I'm truly thankful you've joined us at The Strategic Veteran. If our conversation today sparked curiosity, or if you're ready to elevate your game, I'm here to help. Visit thestrategicveteran.com for exclusive show notes and resources, or to book a coaching session directly with me. Take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and share your review. Your support makes all the difference. For more insights and daily strategies, let's connect on LinkedIn and keep the conversation going. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, it's your strategic advantage in action. Until our next rendezvous, stay bold and continue the mission.